It goes back to that, what I originally asked there, though. Like, I think for a lot of people, it surprises everybody that even these large corporations, to your point, Clifton, that they have to have this mindset shift, that they have to decide to make those changes and likely some investments proactively in order to protect themselves.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like many times a lot of companies, they have the infrastructure, they have the technology, they have the expertise within the company. Many times they don't follow through completely, right? For example, the SolarWinds attack, right? That was that last year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that one actually turned out to be just simply unpatched systems, right? So had the security guidelines for the company set out that, hey, all systems will be patched. This is a way that will ensure that they are patched. This is a verification process that we'll use to ensure that they're patched, right? They probably wouldn't have been in that position, right? I know in addition to that, a lot of companies that I come across many times is, MFA is the answer. And MFA is a great tool to combat that or to safeguard against that, right? But unfortunately, they don't follow through many times with MFA. One of the common things I see is that, they'll enable MFA for the company and then they'll wash their hands of it and go, okay, it's done, right? We've enabled MFA, the two-factor authentication is enabled across the company, but then they never follow through and actually verify, have all the users been required to actually register and go in and utilize MFA, because maybe for many of the users in the company, they're all internal to the company. They never get prompted for the MFA registration process. Well, then all a hacker has to do from the outside is compromise the password. They go in and they registered the MFA registration for the user, and then they're basically in at that point, right? You've now given direct access to somebody sitting in their home and maybe halfway across the world, right? And so I think many times the companies have the technology, like I said, they have even the expertise, but they don't follow those security principles, those guidelines to complete fruition, right? How do we truly verify and validate that these controls that we have in place are protecting us, are fully implemented, and actually meeting our guidelines or our expectations for what they're supposed to do, right? And so I think unfortunately, I think that's where many people find themselves, many companies especially.
And I'm going to jump on that too. I mean, let's be honest. In the 2010s, we had Home Depot, we had Target, we had 2 or 3 different healthcare insurance organizations. I know Aetna was one of them. I mean, you had at one point 80 million credit cards released on the dark web as a breach, right? So of course it happens to big companies, and we see it all the time. And the reason it does is there's a phrase, it's called doors and corners. The more doors and corners you have, the more blind spots you have. And in a big company, there's a lot of doors and corners that you have to walk through and walk around. There's a lot of different departments, different units, different groups, and everything that factors into it. Everyone has a slightly different practice. You'd be surprised how many times, pre-COVID, how many times I walked into a company and there was a sticky note just sitting on someone's desk that had their password and their MFA text, because they had set up their text, they'd set it up to their company phone, which means theoretically, if I've got soft phone or I've got VoIP phones, it doesn't matter where I can, it isn't physically bound to an actual device here. It's actually just wherever I'm at, I can get a text message. So suddenly now things start to rapidly change. Again, it's happened. It's happened to big companies forever, and we miss that. We forget that. And I personally think it's easier for a small company to get in line than it is something that big. And someone the size of I know a few people in Target Technology Services at TTS, which is the IT department for Target. It took them 5 years to move that boat to the point where it was going to the right direction. They're really, really security conscious now. I gave them a lot of credit for it. But to get to that point, it is not easy to get to that with something that big. And I think that's the way I approach it is, there's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of work. And the more isolation you have and the more pockets of isolation you have, the harder it is to get them all on the same road, on the same path. And that's why a smaller company, it actually makes it easier for you to define that security, like Clifton was talking about, to define that security path, to have a designated security person that says, are we patching our servers? Whether that's someone that you employ, or whether that's a contractor, or whether that's, I joke about it, but whether that's someone in accounting that, it also functions as the person who changes the paper out on the printer. It doesn't matter who, but you have to at least see a report that says, oh, these 3 computers aren't patched, or these 300 computers aren't patched. You still have to know that. And patching is by far the number one problem.
I saw in the news just last night, they had an interview and they were discussing, how you can buy, some people are able to buy these encryption tools on the black market. So they make it sound like it's super easy on the back, for these hackers to do this type of thing. But what I think is their superpower, if you will, is the level of patience these hackers have. I've seen statistics and news reports regarding how they will mine data off of the social networks from some of those simple things that we think are just simple polls, like your favorite movies or what are your favorite albums?
Oh, you mean the the password challenge question collection surveys?
Right. That's all they're doing is collecting this stuff and mining this information. And if they do have some sort of small level of infiltration on the accountant computer, they will sit and patiently monitor and watch and until they hit the gold mine. They could be infecting your system for months before the actual encryption occurs.
It is. It's I have a good friend who is a security consultant for a living. She's worked on both sides of a vendor and a consultant, as well as internal. And she said the easiest way to compromise an entire company is to walk in and start handing out USB thumb drives.
Yeah, I heard people just dropping them in the parking lot and hoping somebody picks them up. Yeah.
Yep. And she would come in and hey, I've got these thumb drives. It's got a PDF of our sales slide. I'm not going to bother you with it. I'm just going to put them here. You can look at them if you want, however you want. The minute you plug that thing into your computer, you're done. And she would demonstrate it over and over and over again. I didn't believe her, but she brought 100 of them, and within 3 days they were all gone, and all 100 had been plugged in.
Oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
And what's crazy is how the most companies have the tools necessary to even safeguard against that.
Absolutely.
Environment, group policy, right? You can lock that out to where users across the board can't plug in rogue USBs unless, of course, they have a certain level of encryption, right? That you've defined, within your company, right? And so that's what's crazy is how these tool sets and these safeguards are already there for companies to utilize. Maybe they just lack the expertise or the experience of somebody to come in and help them guide them in that process, right? Or direct them in how to do that. But a lot of times the tool sets are already there and they already have them. So
yeah, and we have customers that have been ransomware before they came to work for us, and they're working for us, and or they're working with us now, and they've been great because it's like firsthand experience. This is how I learn, is seeing and learning from their experiences. Biggest challenge we ran into was there were some servers that hadn't been patched since 2010. I mean, there was Windows Server 2008 machines that had never been patched or had been patched in 2010, and that was it. That was just some examples. And it's gotten awesome to be working with them, because now we're talking those small incremental changes. Now we're talking about a security. We did a vulnerability scan for them just recently off of some of their main applications, and now to start to see them think not just reactive or in some cases pure chaos, but to start walking up the capability maturity model in that index and that label, going from a more purely reactive to more of a proactive, and getting even to be predictive, to say, we know there's a problem with this one, and in 3 months we'll have it patched. They're actually starting to play in that realm. For sure, we're in the proactive right now. We're looking at it and going, yep, now we found a problem. We're going to fix it. Here's the actions that are going to be in place, and planning for it. But all that comes back to mean, you have to be exposed on the internet because we do business on the internet. Now there was a time when companies didn't have to be exposed on the internet, and you had dedicated, hardline links into different companies. And that's even the scarier thing when you think about it. Some of the biggest organizations I've ever worked with, they had hardwired links into major financial institutions. It's 15 years ago, 20 years ago now. But they had hardline WAN links into financial institutions, into manufacturing facilities, into healthcare facilities that they shared with their partners. Honestly, that's a scary thing. So how do I isolate their access? And that becomes things like virtual desktop capabilities. That could become like the tools Clifton was talking about. How do we isolate their access as much as possible and give them visibility into certain components of our environment without ever having to trust that network? I think of 20 years ago, we were very trusting, probably like to a level that we shouldn't have been. It's like, oh yeah, there's a WAN link and we'll have it connected. We'll be fine. Time out. And even 10 years ago, I've seen that. And I haven't seen it recently, thankfully. But Clifton, I'm going to defer to you on this too. Am I wrong in thinking that I always tell people we use about 20% of the tools, 80% of the time. Is that pretty fair?
No, I think that's correct. I think that the tools are there and we're not utilizing them as much, or we're not utilizing the full functionality of the tools. But again, it comes back to what are we trying to safeguard within our company, right? What's, maybe even categorizing our environment to, determine, what's most vulnerable, what's most critical to us, right? Starting with those and then working your way down, right? And how to safeguard those. But then, almost coming to the conclusion at the end of as you're building out a security policy that says, okay, in the event that we do get compromised, right? I think I've heard it said many times, it's not necessarily a matter of if you're going to get compromised, it's a matter of when, right? And so, having those DR plans, those business continuity plans that define, okay, well, let's assume that we are going to get ransomware, right? How do we protect ourselves, or how do we get ourselves back into a position where we are able to conduct business and, without necessarily having to pay off the ransomware, right? And so again, back into your business continuity planning and your DR planning, looking at doing, offline backups, ensuring that you have backups available, that aren't necessarily directly connected to your environment that the hackers have direct access to. Those are key components, and I think again it comes back to having that plan in place in the first place, to protect yourself in case that does happen. So.
No, I'm glad that you brought up the customer example, Aaron, because I feel like you didn't spend enough time on it, to be frank. I mean, that they were having some pretty significant crypto issues, and they were being encrypted like on a regular basis until we helped. And then Stratum, I mean, we frankly have a security by default posture. So when we took over their infrastructure, I mean, it was a pretty drastic change for them, but they had to do it.
To their credit, they fought it tooth and nail for a while, and until they saw the value of it. And they've done an incredible job of adopting the same idea that we have, which is security by default. The way I kind of believe it is, I don't trust anyone, so it's a zero trust model. Machines, anything outside of my data center, I don't trust. I got that from when I worked at Microsoft. I had a customer in Minneapolis, and they treated anything outside of their data center as if it was in the internet. And even if it was on the other side of that wall of the data center and it was a collection of users, they treated it as if it was on the internet. And man, I'll tell you what, it was a heck of a lot easier when that zero trust model started to exist, how you went, I want you to be Azure AD domain joined, this was a long time ago now, but they weren't Azure AD domain joined, but they had read-only domain controllers outside of the data center that's what you authenticated against. And it was only exposed to this small subset of an OU or whatever. And those simple things like that allow you then to selectively target what that looks like. Now, fast forward 12 years, and this was in 2009, fast forward 12 years, we have cool things like Azure AD domain join. We have, other products that are out there. I think Jump Cloud is one of them, where they have domainless enterprise. They're promoting domainless enterprise. You have Okta that allows you to spread across, integration with authentication across any number of different platforms. Those things allow you to do that domainless or Active Directory domainless enterprise a lot easier. And but you can't lose sight of the fact that you're trying to accomplish a thing. And Clifton has said it several times, and I'm going to reiterate it again. If you lose sight of the thing you're trying to accomplish, you're just going to have a really cool tool. We have tools out there all the time. So
it seems like there was a lot to unpack here today, and I think we kind of pointed people hopefully in the right direction. But before we close it out, is there any closing thoughts? Anything that we probably should have brought up that we didn't hear yet?
I mean, there's always you play how you practice, I think is the phrase I was trying to say. You play how you practice. So it is incredibly important to actually simulate a crypto failure, a crypto lock. Turn a machine off and say, how do I recover this back? It doesn't have to be online. It can be nearline or in an offline recovery model, but practice, because that way it is rehearsal for disaster. I mean, I live in Houston. Clifton lives in Oklahoma City. We have to practice for disasters. What happens if? What happens if you get 55 inches of rain in 3 days? Well, now I know what's happening, and I can plan for that. What happens if F5 hurricane or F5 tornadoes decide to drag along the south side of Oklahoma City? Guess what? You can practice for that and know this is a disaster recovery activity. This is a ransomware affected activity, and have plans that at least. And I think my personal preference is update them. Don't update them. Don't send them out and say, here's our plan, break in case of emergency. Here's our plan, and we'll come back at it in 3 years and review it. It should be reviewed quarterly. It should be completely revised annually, but it should be at least reviewed quarterly, and it should be practiced at least twice a year. Like, this is what we're going to do. It's a lot of investment in a company, but I mean, Colonial Pipeline was $90 million in Bitcoin. I mean, that's a lot of investment that they could have lost.
Right.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. I think that it honestly comes back to the planning, right? Unfortunately, I think for a lot of companies, you don't know what you don't know. Maybe they just don't have that mindset of that pre-planning or where to begin, and so that's where I think a lot of outside help many times can provide them those scenarios that they need to plan for. But again, that's 90% of it, right? Is all in the plan. Right. It's not, 10% planning, 90% work. Really, it's 90% is the planning. And really, it's very easy to get to those, those phases as you build them out, right, based on the right planning that you have, and so, bringing in experts that actually have that experience, that knowledge, will allow them to answer those questions and be able to build that plan more effectively. So. Yep,
absolutely. And I think you hit it on the head right there, Clifton.
Well, you've mentioned a couple times now. I think that there again is a company mindset that has to be broken through, is that investment. It's out of sight, out of mind. They don't think it's ever going to happen to them. And then now they have tens of millions of dollars that they are faced with in paying in ransomware. The concept of spending a little investment up front to prevent that from happening it's what they don't know.
Yeah, and it's insurance. I mean, I'm a business owner. You guys drive cars. Everybody at some point or another buys insurance. That's the thing you pay a lot of money for, that you pray that you never actually have to use. The same thing is true about that plan. You spend some money on it and genuinely pray you never have to use it. But if you do, at least then you have it.
So, well, thanks, guys. This is a great conversation. I hope people get something out of it. And if you want some additional help or if you want more information and have a conversation with Aaron and Clifton, we can definitely talk to you about how we can help you with those security posture. And head over to stratumtechnology.com. Thank you for watching Stratum's Cloud Interrupted. If you like what you see, please subscribe, like, and share this video.